Hello everybody, and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope we're doing well, and today we'll be talking about a little bit of news that I mentioned in a previous video, but breaking it down a little bit more, and that is that Disney has announced that its entire 2021 slate, or the rest of the films coming out in 2021 from Disney, will all be theatrically exclusive after about 30 to 45 days, in which case then they move over to Disney Plus and on-demand services. So, the question is going to be, is this the right move for Disney as a company? Is this the right move for movie theaters? And what is likely going to be the end result? Before going any further, please make sure that you smash that like button, light up that fire button if you're watching over on Odyssey. Also, make sure you subscribe to the channel with that bell notification turned on. That way you know every time a new video or live stream goes live on the channel. So, we have this article here from Deadline saying Disney's Eternals, West Side Story, Encanto, Last Duel, and more to hit theaters ahead of streaming bow. So all of this, of course, is in reaction to the seeming success of Shang-Chi. Remember that when it comes to Shang-Chi, it is doing incredibly well if we look at the domestic numbers for pandemic times, but internationally, it is not making nearly as much of a splash. In fact, comparing it to some of the biggest budget films coming from Disney this year, when you look to films like Black Widow, for instance, making $187 million internationally, Free Guy up to $174 million internationally, or Jungle Cruise's paltry $86.9 million internationally, what you can see is that there is this international box office problem, where the international box office really isn't showing up in the same capacity, in the same way as in previous years. Now, obviously, it's because there is, again, this pandemic that has still shut down many countries, shut down many theaters, even though there seems to be a very little indication that there's any type of spread that comes from movie theaters. There's been really no study connecting movie theaters to any type of outbreak, for instance, and yet we still see that theaters tend to be some of the first places to either get shut down or to have the most vast restrictions put on them. What we do find, though, is that those numbers still are not very good, and the movies that are coming out still cost the same amount of money, because obviously they've been in production now for a long time, since before the pandemic. Films like Shang-Chi, for instance, cost $150 million, Black Widow $200 million, Free Guy was estimated to cost around $150 million or so, Jungle Cruise costing $200 million as well. Now, of course, the big difference is that Free Guy was made under 20th Century Fox before the Fox deal, and so as far as financial loss or gain for Disney, it's a little bit more complicated there to really work out because of the fact that, again, they technically lost money by buying a company, so how much money have they actually made from the project? Are they taking on that company's, debts, etc.? Again, it gets a little bit too complicated for my eyes, too, because I just break down numbers that are actually reported and can actually work with. And so here we have, again, production budgets and actual domestic total box offices, and those are much easier to be able to understand and break down in such a way. Another interesting factoid is the fact that Shang-Chi actually got more theaters in its opening weekend than films like Black Widow or Free Guy. It's interesting that Jungle Cruise and Shang-Chi both opened in over 4,300 theaters, and yet Black Widow, which you would think would be, kind of their tentpole film of the year, got less in the theatrical release. Again, I just find that a bit interesting here. Free Guy, of course, I don't think they even expected the film to be as successful as it is, making $276 million worldwide and getting very close to the realm of profitability. That is, of course, until you take into account the fact that it has a huge portion of its new box office coming from China, which they only get 25% of, by the way. Remember, and I always remind people, Disney works with communists in China. But the question is, again, is this going to have an impact on these future movies going forward? Is this going to be the best move for Disney or for movie theaters in general? And really, it's kind of a mixed bag when you think about it, because when it comes to films like The Eternals, for instance, I don't really see what markets or what audience they're going to be going after. It was very clear in the marketing campaign and also all of the media coverage when it came to Shang-Chi. It was all about trying to really focus on the Asian American audience, right? They kept bringing up former releases that featured all Asian or mostly Asian cast or Asian American cast, and they tried to kind of, connect this movie. They tried to connect Shang-Chi with that audience in as many ways as possible. And it really was, in a lot of ways, this coordinated effort by both media and also by the studio itself. And hey, it ended up working for them pretty well in the domestic market. But that type of messaging did not work as well in that foreign market. As I've shown previously, that international number has been down for all films this year, but especially when you look to this movie, you're going to see a very lopsided domestic versus international, because they're really heavily relying on, based on their own marketing and based on the coverage that's been given to the film, the Asian American market showing up for the movie. Which again kind of raises its own questions and its own issues there, because you're thinking to yourself, okay, so what you're saying is that the media and the and the studio is just assuming that people will show up to a movie because of the person on screen looking like them. Again, I just don't understand how that does not cause some kind of a problem, right? Identity politics does indeed raise that issue, and it is a bit of an issue to be sure. However, it worked for them as far as what we see going on right now with films like Shang-Chi. I did this in my box office breakdown just the other day, that the film right now is projected to make money. And according to the modeling that I use and have been using for a while now, and again, my chart goes back to 2019 numbers, and so you can see just how accurate the chart is. Most of the time, it's pretty accurate. Of course, there's always going to be exceptions to that, because when it comes to predicting things, hey, people are people. So sometimes people show up and sometimes people don't show up after the fact. But based on 2 weeks, the film is likely going to be anywhere from a $4 million loss to an $84 million gain. So more likely, it's going to be in that financial gain territory. And remember, this is just based off of the modeling that I use. We've seen a couple of films this year, especially for pandemic times, when it's even more difficult to predict these things long term, because it's harder to predict that third week drop off, fourth week drop off, etc. What you're going to find is that this film could potentially make even more money. It could also theoretically make less money, right? It could totally drop off. I doubt that, because there really isn't any major competition, at least as the movies are concerned, for at least a couple more weeks. But it is, again, something that is worth noting, that the reason why this film is as successful as it is because of what it is making in the domestic market. It's not because of the international success. And remember, that domestic success is because of how they were able to market the film. The Eternals is a bit of a mixed bag, because who are they going to market it to? I mean, when you talk about, as far as, Disney comic book fans in general, seem relatively split on this, right? There's some people who are, big fans of the comics, of the modern day comics, who are excited for this film and excited for the diversity they're going to see on screen, while there are old school comic fans that are not as excited. They say, the Eternals really wasn't that big of a storyline, and what they've done with the characters as far as, race or gender swapping doesn't make a lot of sense, except when you understand that it's a part of their identity politics game, and are kind of turned off by it. And so you kind of ask that question. So if it's not completely for comic fans, and it's not going to have a dedicated audience, or at least in the same capacity as they try to make clear in the way that they marketed films like Shang-Chi, who then are they going to try and market this to? Are they just going to try and market it as a diverse triumph? Because even if they try to do that, it doesn't guarantee success. Go ahead and look to films like In the Heights, for instance. In the Heights was an incredibly diverse film, and yet it didn't do anything at the box office, and that's not just because of the HBO Max same-day release. It, even compared to other HBO Max same-day releases, just didn't do much of anything at all. So I think that's a big question as far as the Eternals is concerned, is it going to be able to motivate the domestic market enough? Because the international market really can't be relied upon for a lot of these movies. I guess their thought is, because they're casting certain people, and because they're trying to focus on different ethnic backgrounds, that's how they're going to be able to maybe get some outreach overseas. Maybe they're crossing their fingers that there's going to be a China deal in the works. Obviously, there's the rumors that Eternals could eventually get a China release, just like they were able to work out with Free Guy, for instance. But again, it's going to be a bit of an issue when you have Chloe Zhao, who's the director of the Eternals, who, again, the word came out, especially during Oscar season, about how she has been critical of communist China in the past, which is a good thing, right? It's a good thing to point that out. It's also a good thing, as I've mentioned in previous videos too, that the lead actor of Shang-Chi has also been critical of communist China as well, and yet continues to work for a company and promote a company that, of course, has worked with communist China and given them countless millions of dollars, which have led to, let's just say, probably tons of innocent lives being affected by it. Because if you fund the government, guess what? The government can act in that way. But it is, again, something that is going to be worth noting. Films like West Side Story, on the other hand, I think they are going to clearly go after and market this towards most likely going to market this towards the Hispanic demographic. It's also a musical. It's a Spielberg movie too, so they're going to probably, try and drum that up a little bit, but I would not be surprised if everything you see in the marketing, everything that you see in the news media coverage is going to go after, right, the Spanish-speaking population of the United States and try and really get this film to do well with those audiences in general. So it's going to be interesting to see how that film does as it comes out later this year. Obviously, a film like Encanto, for instance, they're going to probably try and do the same thing. Don't know much about Last Duel, but of course, the biggest movie on here is The Eternals. But just to go down into this article just a little bit, it says, Disney said today the remaining films of its 2021 slate will get an exclusive theatrical window before arriving in homes. Major news for a studio that's gotten endless flack and been hit with a very high-profile lawsuit for its day-and-date releases on Disney Plus blockbusters. Last weekend for Marvel's Shang-Chi and Legend of the Ten Rings, which wasn't available to stream, likely sealed the deal, showing moviegoers are increasingly willing to return to cinemas for specific movies and if you're going to market it in a certain way. So I think that context is incredibly important because when you compare this to other films to come out this year, you realize that those numbers really are a bit on the inflated side. Because, if you're going to kowtow, if you're going to pander to a certain audience, and you're going to try and drive a certain audience to show up, and they do, okay, you've just done exactly what it is that you wanted to do in the first place. But if you still see consistently the international market not showing up for this movie, and you see kind of all over the place the domestic market coming out for this movie, and the fact that these are films that are costing hundreds upon hundreds of millions of dollars in most of these cases, you're going to have a bit of an issue if you're just going to rely on people, coming out of their way to go see it. Also, this is not taking into account how now we're living in a world where the leader of the free world, as it's often known, right, our own president, is talking about trying to, again, mandate people to be vaccinated upon other things. So don't be surprised if major cities that lean a certain way are going to start to try and require businesses to show proof of vaccination or to have, people who are going to the theaters show proof of vaccination in order to go to a movie. Guess what? That is going to have an impact on your numbers too. So I don't think they are really thinking long-term and fully what impact these kinds of things and these kinds of policies are going to have on the movie-going public, because the question I also asked at the beginning was, is this going to be good for theaters? And it's, again, kind of going to be a mixed bag, because while you're going to have a lot of people excited to be able to go see a movie in a theater again, or a film that they've been maybe looking forward to for a long time, that have been pushed back and delayed and delayed and delayed for a long time, you are also going to have that other side of it, which is, what about the people who are going to be told, no, you can't go. You can't go. Because now apparently we live in some type of totalitarian, future dystopic universe, which is kind of insane when you think about it in the words that have been said recently. By the way, I am not a doctor. Please consult your doctor for any and all medical choices. But it is, again, still interesting, nonetheless, that we see this stuff going on. As it says here, Walt Disney Animation Studios' Encanto will bow November 24th with a 30-day exclusive theatrical window before appearing on Disney Plus. So I'm assuming that means it's going to appear on Disney Plus for free. Sounds like a movie that I could wait 30 days to watch. 5 other films will have 45-day exclusive runs in cinemas: The Last Duel, Ron's Gone Wrong, Eternals, West Side Story, and The King's Man, December 22nd. So again, it's one of those things where these are films that I generally, other than The King's Man maybe to some extent, have no real interest in seeing in theaters. The only way that I would have ever watched them is if they were for free on services like Disney Plus, because that's just the way that it goes, right? But in the end, we are seeing ourselves in a situation where they are relying on the success of one film that was geared towards a specific audience, and that audience seemingly has shown up, and they're ignoring everything else that has happened this year and how much money they have lost in the marketplace because of films like because of films like Jungle Cruise and Black Widow costing so much and not really making back their money in the long run. It's not just Disney either, right? We've seen Warner Brothers have this similar issue too. And while many try and say that a lot of their box office numbers are kind of being affected by the HBO Max service, same day and date release, once again, there is still some mixed information there about just how much of an impact that actually has financially on their films going forward, especially when a lot of the movies that they have been releasing have not really gotten the ravest of reviews. Really, not until Shang-Chi has Disney had a film that's gotten even somewhat positive buzz in this capacity, in this same way, even though I myself really doubt just how positive that buzz actually is. I keep people in the comment section all the time saying, oh, the word of mouth on this film is so good, just look at Rotten Tomatoes. Oh, So look at Rotten Tomatoes, which is notorious for silencing critical voices and changing its entire system so that it works better for these bigger budget films to be able to basically vet all reviews. If you go to even sites like, for instance, sites that I think are a little bit more trustworthy, sites like Metacritic, you're seeing scores in the 70s from critics and from fans, which shows you that there is a bit more of a mixed bag. Because if you take even just those tops and bottom numbers, you see a lot of people that are just trying to affect the score by giving it a 10 or giving it a 0. And if you take those out, you realize, okay, it is much more of a mixed bag in general as far as the general mindset of this film. So even then, you're looking at a very specific situation here. So they're taking, again, the success of one specific movie and not looking at the long-term impact. So what do I think is going to happen? I think that, again, I tend not to make long-term projections on box office because I like to have actual numbers and data in front of me to actually be able to crunch these things. I would say Eternals probably not going to be as successful as Shang-Chi, if I had to make a guess, just because I don't know what audience they're going to market to. If they change their marketing campaign to make it very clear, maybe that mindset will change for me. West Side Story, I think, could really go either way. Again, it's a film that no one asked for. No one asked for a remake of it, really, and so I don't really know exactly how well that's going to do. However, once again, I do think they're going to try and go after a Spanish-speaking audience, and so that could, again, have a big domestic total for the film because of it. Same with Encanto, as well as being an animated film. Again, they're going to try and probably go after those audiences as well, among others. So it's going to be a mixed bag. I really do think it's going to be a bit of a mixed bag. The big thing, though, I think the next big thing really for Disney is going to be Eternals, and I just don't know if there's going to be enough because international money is incredibly important for films like Eternals, which cost north of $200 million. The only reason why Shang-Chi is in a position of profitability is because the film cost $50 million less than Black Widow did. So if they had put in the same amount of money into this movie as they have with other previous movies, it would be in financial loss territory, or most likely would be in financial loss territory. So I think that these are things that have to be weighed. You have to put these things in proper context to fully understand them. But anyway, what are your thoughts about this? Do you think that these releases being put out theatrically exclusive are going to be good for the studio? Again, I think it's probably going to be a bit mixed for Disney itself. And then for movie theaters, I mean, I think there's going to have obviously some positive impact because it's going to force people who actually want to see these films to go to a theater. But again, there's a lot of these other political dynamics that are going to possibly have an impact, and so it could actually end up backfiring in certain ways if the major cities that are having these films in their theaters are going to have any type of forced, showing of and proof of vaccination or anything like that. Again, it's going to have an impact. So what are your thoughts? Let me know in the comment section below. If you like this video, smash that like button, light up that fire button. It really does mean a lot. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge shout out to all of my September Locals, Patreon, and Subscribe Star members. First with my Locals members, Cats App, D Sharp, It's a Modern Major General Story, Laura Bifford Hobbit, and Robert Barnes. I want to give a shout out to, especially to Laura, who is now a double supporter on Locals and on Patreon. So thank you for that. And to all of my Locals members. A shout out also to my Patreon members, Andrew Hoyle, animation commentator Brandon, Brian P., Christopher Bowman, Don Bruno de la Mancha, Father Christopher Miller, Hail to you, Father, Father Damian Cook, Garrett Searles, Hannibal Grimm, Harold Francis, Inflamed Wood, Jacob Juice, Jeffrey Toon, Joe Horn, Jonathan Carney, Gomer Kyle 79, Laura the Modern Major General Story once again, Mike Jackson, Mad Mitch Dunaway, Mondo Spieler, Mr. Peabody, On to June, Orange Hat Reviews, Out of Step with Reality, Priscilla Hall, Rosetta Ullen, Teresa Martin, Theodore Bendon, Tina Bojan, and Tina B., the Empress of the Universe. And a shout out also to my Subscribe Star members, The R, Fast Reaction, Nosferatu Gatsu, John B., Perpetual Punster, Mr. Roy, Glinzer, J. Alex McCarthy Jr., Dean Heiss / the new number 2, J-Rod the Beer Guru, and ZK Man. Thank you all very much for supporting the channel. And I want to give a huge shout out to new members, one-time supporters over on Locals, Kara Tharp, K Tharp 56, and Brett D 90. Thank you again for being a one-time supporter over on Locals, and also to my newest Patreon member, Stan Gunevik. And hopefully I pronounced that correctly, but thank you for being my newest members. It really does mean a lot. And if you want to have your name shouted out at the end of every single video or live stream on the main channel, please check out the links in the description below, specifically that top link, which will bring you to all of the links to my various social media pages and also places of support as well. And remember that if you join at the Army of Asgard level, you also get access to giveaways of 4K titles. Right now, I have a live giveaway of Snatch on 4K Steelbook. I've also got ones for Dread, Wrath of Man Blu-ray. I've also got A Quiet Place Part 2 on 4K. I've got Top Gun on 4K, Sicario on 4K, tons of films and more to come, especially as more films are getting released for those giveaways. At the Keeper of the Bifrost level, you get all of that, plus you get access to an exclusive podcast that I do with John the Flick Pick Flickinger. Not only do you get to listen to the podcast, you also get to ask questions that we answer as much as we can and as fully as we can in a much more, I guess you could say, uncensored way, but again, a much more free-flowing way for our members over there at the Keeper of the Bifrost level above. And if you join the Chosen of Valhalla level, you get access to all of those things. Plus, in your first month, you get a free t-shirt, your choice, and I send it to you no matter where you are in the world. And also, you get to once a month be featured on the channel in the Chosen of Valhalla live stream, where we talk about movie, news, and pretty much anything that you want to talk about. So if that all sounds like fun to you, check out those links below. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless.